This episode of the Upper Marae contains strong discussions about suicide, mental health, and personal experiences with loss. These topics may be distressing for some listeners. Information and support are provided at the end of the episode.
We're going up, up, up to the Upper Marae, where stories lift and voices fly. Put your tea towels down, let your worries fade. Open the gates, let the memories cascade. In this podcast world, we give it our best. So grab your cup or come say I know Jess. We're going up to the Upper Marae, where conversations flow and spirits can't lie.
Welcome to the Upper Marae. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Alexander Stevens II, and in this episode, I'm joined by my comrades, Nigel Peterson,
Talofa.
And finally, we've managed to get Sione Finau on board, Malo. Yet our Kereru, Irie, has flown the coop, so this is going to be us three today. Today we're having an important and honest conversation about our tāne or men's health in relation to suicide in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So these are difficult topics, but they're also conversations that need to be had. And we're talking about the pressures many men face in this country, barriers asking for help, how they might be seen, and what communities can do to support one another. Traditionally, our format has always been one of us leading the conversation, but in this case, each of us will be tackling a couple of questions each and coming up with potential answers.
Why are suicide rates higher among men in New Zealand?
Well, in New Zealand, I think men are significantly more likely to die by suicide than women. We already know this. One reason is that many men feel pressured to appear strong and self-reliant, which is interesting because in one sense, you're kind of seen as you have to be strong and you have to be seen to be doing this job, and if you show any weakness, then you are mocked in this country kind of relentlessly. And I think that can make it harder to admit when we are struggling. What about cultural expectations, Nigel? What do you think from either a social work perspective or your own worldview about masculinity?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely contributing factors that make it really hard mentally for men. They put pressure on them, like expectations of like cultural commitments, even church commitments as well is quite challenging. A lot of them are sort of like wrapped around finance, because finance is a really big one. As you know, having worked in financial capability, it does put a lot of strain on particularly guys, and it's around things like stigma as well. You know, you're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to have all the answers, and you're supposed to put food on the table. These typical stereotypes of men, but then that's a lot of pressure to put on our bros, and then just I think the other thing too is just our own ideas of I want to be better, I should be better, why can't I be better, and that stuff does weigh heavily on a lot of our brothers. Yeah.
I know you're supposed to be leading this section, Stuart, what do you think?
Oh, that's how it works.
What about from a Tongan perspective, though? You've just heard
I think
Nigel talk about it.
I definitely think that a lot of Tongans would probably resonate with the same conversation as well. But then also kind of bringing in like general youth across New Zealand, topic of technology. I think there's some things you might see on the media of, I guess, what a male should be, what should it look like. And I think that kind of shifts perspectives of like, this is what this person is supposed to be, and this is where I'm at. And then that might kind of sway like decisions around their own self-esteem, their own worth, and they can definitely lead down a path of that darkness, that te kore.
I think when stress builds up from like work, finances, and relationships, which is what you both have talked about, and then our bros go into isolation, I think it reaches a crisis point. And when our bros don't have any support or have minimal support, especially in terms of, you know, who do I go to and how do I go to someone, I think that's when we start to go, as you say, down that path of te kore, and I think that's only just scratching the surface about why we have high suicide rates.
Also acknowledging services.
Yeah.
Health systems just under the pressure at the moment. Can't accommodate to everyone.
I think that's a part of it. You know, like addictions, mental health, all that stuff as well. So it is complex.
Yeah. So the next question. Why do many Kiwi men find it difficult to talk about mental health?
Yeah. Well, I guess we kind of touched a little bit on it. Messaging like harden up, she'll be right, just get on with it. Those attitudes make vulnerability feel like weakness. So as a result, many men just keep problems to themselves or try to cope alone. And those challenges are shifting the idea that strength means silence, and instead seeing strength as being able to kind of reach out when things get tough, I suppose, is my thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think just with some of the guys that I've worked with recently and in the past, some of them don't know how to describe what's going on. They don't know how, and you and I have used this quite a bit. Sometimes you don't have the words to describe like the pain that you might be experiencing or the pressure that you're going through. I think another one of the barriers is culture, trying to explain to someone who's not from the culture what's going on. And because if we look at things from like a Eurocentric or Western perspective, a lot of them are like, just stop. Just stop giving money to your family, to your church. That is having to explain like culture to somebody who's not from the culture is an added pressure. And for a lot of guys, they just don't want to, which is where we're in a privileged position that we just get it. And so when we meet with Māori Pacific, they don't have to explain much. They can just talk about it. They can just say, somebody's passed away and, I can barely pay the rent. I can barely pay for the groceries. The kids, they've got their school fees and the uniforms have to be paid for. But then, my uncle passed away in the islands. And so I'm torn between the living and the dead, for lack of a better word. I'm torn between trying to support the one that's passed on and then the ones who are still alive. And that's really hard. It's really hard. And some people would, contemplate hurting themselves as opposed to having to go and say that to their family and face the shame of being ostracized by family or being looked down upon. And that happens here in Aotearoa as well. Like, we're not immune from the same pressures. It's not as intense as in our communities or back home in the islands, but it is still there, just to a lesser degree of intensity. All right, my question: what are some of the warning signs that a man might be struggling? I'm talking to men, so I'm talking to my two brothers. What are some signs that you're struggling?
We can't really name all of it in this one episode.
But go on, Sione, name a couple.
Lack of sleep.
Yeah. Are you like doing mental health styles? Because that's such a bit. To look into is like, how's your sleep going? Is it broken sleep? Is it like, are you sleeping X amount of hours?
Eating.
But no one thinks about it though.
Yeah.
No one thinks about sleep or eat, or whether they're eating, whether they have a healthy appetite, or are they binge eating. So things like that. What's some other warning signs?
What are your warning signs?
My warning signs.
Yes.
Warning signs that you're struggling, or something's not quite right.
You know what? I think for me, definitely emotions. Probably be it.
You become more emotional?
Yeah.
Or you become is it emotional numbing? Is it the mental health term?
Man, that's no, I don't know all of the emotions, but I think, yes, emotions would be one for me.
Yeah.
I think because I'm trying to deal with a lot,
True.
I would probably try and address like the important thing at hand first. And then what that will do will kind of cause a backlog of things I didn't address, like emotion-wise. So I think that's an example.
What about you, Doctor?
I think, well, mine's eating or overeating, and so I've definitely been thinking about this more recently. I also think that men show distress differently to women, so they can show it through anger, withdrawal, increased drinking, risky behaviour, working excessively.
Man, I think you're explaining it. No, is that all of us?
Don't look at me, guys. For some, not all, for some of our men, they might stop contacting their friends. You know, they lose interest in doing things. Doom scrolling. You know, I think one of the things that I'm always careful of is, as you're listening to this, don't think that, oh, look, my husband or my man or my brother is showing one or more of these signs, because the challenge is that there are different signs for different people. These are just some broader examples. One of the things, if I'm doing an anxiety or depression test, is just asking them, you know, how they enjoy just general things, or have they lost interest. Listening obviously is quite important. So are they suggesting hopelessness? Has their behaviour changed noticeably? Especially if they seem overwhelmed, you know, it's kind of worth checking in. What about for yourself?
Yeah. All of the above. I think one of the other things too is just identifying what does a good day look like, and then what does a not so good day look like. Because sometimes if we're talking to people like our bros, and we say, okay, so are you you know asking all the questions that you guys have been talking about, like are you what do you like doing? What do you enjoy doing? When was the last, like, are you doing it right now? Are you in routine? Are you out of routine? If I were to, I love those reflective questions where I say, okay, if I were to talk to your partner, or if I were to talk to your mum, and they were to describe how you're doing at the moment, what do you think they might say? So asking sorts of questions like that, just to gauge, you know, what's their baseline? What's their baseline for wellness and well-being? And then build off of that. But then also identifying, like, applying really key active listening skills and picking up on the strengths. So, so even if they're talking, like the tone of voice, there might be a warning sign, or it's like one word answers, where you know you've asked like an open question and they should be able to talk a bit more, but they're just like, yeah, no, I don't know. Definitely emotional numbing. Where what they're saying doesn't match how they're presenting, how they're showing themselves.
Yes.
And then just actually naming it. And I think us as male practitioners, we're really good at, like, not going around the bush, but we can just actually just say, hey man, there's something not quite right with what you're saying and how you're looking. So when they talk about things they enjoy, it's like, you don't look like you enjoy those things. What's going on?
I think from a wider perspective, it's when you think that's a bit weird. They're saying something, you know, they're saying something, or they're doing something, and you might be thinking that's a bit weird. You know, a good example, I was just thinking, having listened to some of my clients from back in the day, something like, oh, he told me that he loved me, which was a bit odd because it was one bro saying it to another, and it was like, it was a bit, or saying, you know, like all the bills are up to date and paid for, when before all he would talk about was how much debt there was. So, like I said, there's no clear warning signs that equal suicide, but it's when there's, I guess for me, things that are out of character, out of step, and there's
that's right.
pattern. That's when I kind of think, hey, there's something that we need to kind of address.
What can friends and family do if they're worried about one of our bros?
I guess for me, it's about having a conversation. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, I don't mean to throw you in, but you know, when you had a bad day the other week, just, you don't have to say, well, look, let's sit down and talk about our feelings, Sione. You know, like, that's just weird for me. But actually saying, hey, bro, you know, like, what's up? You know, there's something off.
Yeah.
How do we talk about this? How do we talk about it? How are you really doing? Can open the door. I think, and this is what you were saying before in terms of how do male practitioners, how do males do it. I'd like to think that we just listen without trying to jump in there and try to fix stuff. You know, you don't need to fix everything. Sometimes just being present and encouraging our bros to talk, regardless of if you're a professional or someone who's not, you know, can just make a big difference. What about with all your training and extensive experience? Sione, what have you learned?
Yeah, no, I think you both covered it. I think there's nothing much to say.
And you've got something to say, so say it.
No, I agree. I think both of you with the long list of experience and years in the field. Bear in mind, I'm quite a fledgling.
It's your favourite word.
But yeah, not much to add. And then also kind of considering sometimes there might not be any family or friends that could be available, and then there's the helplines, and that might be another way of kind of reaching out for help for those who might not have someone.
I do think that we need to have more information to support people.
Agree.
What message would you give to men who feel like they have to deal with everything on their own?
What do you think, Sione?
Well, one step at a time.
There's no need to rush.
Yep.
Like learning to fly or falling in love.
Yes, all of the above.
Yeah, hecka. Is that honestly your answer? One step at a time?
Yes, and I guess reach out for help.
Right.
That's short and efficient.
Doctor.
Hey, it's all contextual. I think, irrespective of ethnicity in New Zealand, it's hard to reach out. You know, you're talking about like the matais and the chest and then how it goes down. I was thinking because suicide is an equalizer. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor or your status. In fact, if anything, sometimes your status can often put pressure on you, or sometimes not having a status can also put pressure on you. So it's one of those things that kind of equals out in an odd kind of way. If I go on with what you're saying, it's true, you don't have to carry everything by yourself. Reaching out is important, but how do you do that? Is it to a friend? Is it to a helpline? Is it to a professional? Is it to a support service? You know, I was talking to a guy just in general, so it was a counselling session, but he recognised me. And he said to me, don't you think it's weak talking to someone? And then proceeded to tell me his life story before I even had a chance to respond. So in a sense, you know, there is these beliefs around, you know, as men we don't talk, and yet I think people want to be heard. And I think for many of our men, you know, they've been in this really dark place, and sometimes I think they want to find their way out with support. But what does that look like? I guess my message is that there are people who care and want to help.
Yes.
And for you, brother?
I'm thinking two things. I'm thinking all behaviour is communication of some sort.
Beautiful.
And so I think for us guys, especially guys who, you know, we don't come from privileged backgrounds.
No.
So we're pretty good at recognising like risk or risky behaviour. And so I'm thinking if we could equip other people to be the same. Not be experts, you know, not be experts, but be able to recognise when someone's not quite right. So if we can encourage them to do that as a way to open the door and have that conversation, because talking about suicide is really hard. Like we've learned to do it because we're so used to like having quite a frank conversation with people. But for those people out there in our communities, probably listening to this podcast right now, it's not we acknowledge it's not an easy conversation to have. But it's a conversation that needs to be had because it's literally life or death, which is why we're talking about suicide today. And also, just echoing what both of you have said, you don't have to carry everything by yourself. Reaching out to a friend, family member, or support service is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of courage. Many of our usos, many of our tokos, many of our tuakana and teina, they are in dark places at the moment. And so there is a way forward. And there are people out there, as you said, Dr. Alexander, that care. And we care as well. Like we do this for the love of it. We don't do it for the money. And so, yeah, we do want to help.
If I had to add in my final thoughts, if someone in New Zealand is struggling, there are free and confidential services available 24/7. For example, there is the 1737 Need to Talk, which offers call or text support anytime by dialing or texting 1737. And Lifeline Aotearoa provides trained counsellors who can listen and help people through difficult moments. You can call Lifeline Aotearoa on 0800 543 354 or free text HELP to 4357.
Thank you for that information, Sione. That brings our podcast to a close. Gentlemen, thank you very much. To everyone that's listening, help is available. The gates are now closing. Till next time, Mori ora.